Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at the game that won the Tabletop Deathmatch. I guess the first Tabletop Deathmatch. I think it may be the second one. Sorry, I don't know. I don't watch Tabletop Deathmatch, but it won Tabletop Deathmatch. And this is published by Asmati Games. It is called Penny Press. And as you might guess, it is a game about publishing newspapers. I love the box, first off. I like the fact that it's got this cool, twine tied around a newspaper look. Very cool there. And the components inside of it are great. We'll see those soon. But the game is a worker placement / movement / area control / newspaper publishing game on which you're trying to scoop the best stories. You might give some points to other players for taking them out of the story, but publish them in your own paper, lay that paper out well, and score a lot of points. So real quick, we'll take a look at what you get inside of this box. We'll see how the game plays, and we'll come back at the end and get my opinions on Penny Press. So here you can see Penny Press all set up for a 4-player game. Now the idea of this game is that each player is running their own newspaper and they're trying to do their best to cover the various stories that are going to come up in New York City. Those stories are war, crime and calamity, politics, New York City, and the human condition, or as I like to call them, sinking ships, guns, eagle heads, bridges, and tennis balls, or maybe it's a baseball. Who knows? But anyhow, I'm going to refer to them from their symbols from now on because I can't remember what they're called. But basically, each player is running their newspaper, and on their turn, they're going to be trying to cover these various stories in order to get the most value out of them. So right now, if we look at these stories, the way that they're set up, we can see that the value of a story in these different things is 1 point, 4 points, 4 points, 1 point, or 3 points if you are the head person covering this story once it's put into your newspaper. But this will change as workers get placed out there. Additionally, if you don't get the story, but you're covering it or trying to cover it, you'll get some points for getting scooped, and those points will be lesser. So right now it's 1 for a baseballs, 0 for a bridges, but 2 if you get scooped on an eagle head. So you're going to be trying to position yourself to either get these stories to publish them in your newspaper, or you're going to be trying to position yourself to not get them, but get scooped and get some points out of it just by having workers there in the meantime. So we got this to this board status by setting it up with these headline cards, and these will get revealed as soon as somebody publishes a newspaper, but you reveal 1 at the start of every game, or 1 for each player at the start of every game, I should say. On these cards, you're going to see various things. First, it's going to tell you that we're looking at a war headline. Then it's going to tell you how much to advance a bonus marker. So we'll see that right now the bonus marker for sinking ships is at 4. They all start at 2, and it went up 2 when we revealed this card, thus why it's at 4. It also tells you what stories to put out. So we put out a bridges, a gun, and a sinking ship of types A, C, and B, which are the different shapes of them, and will also be worth more points based on the stars that are on them, kind of. The stars are worth things at the end of the game in terms of bonus if you have the most stars of a particular type of story. Finally, it will tell you at the bottom where your advertisements to go in future portions. There are no advertisements at the start of the game, so this doesn't matter, but you draw several of these to set up at the start of the game, and that's how we got to this current board state. Now, on a player's turn, they basically have the choice of placing workers, removing workers, moving workers, or they're going to go ahead and go to press, publishing their newspaper. When you place workers, you are going to be placing as many of these workers as you want, so you have 5 workers, as many as you want onto any one story that you would like. So, for example, right now I can clearly see that the crime or the guns stories are worth 4. And that I like the one with a couple of stars on it. So I'm going to go ahead and say I'll place 2 of my workers out onto this story. And right now, I have the most workers on this story. That's my action for the turn. On a future turn, somebody else's, they could go ahead and place more workers than me on there if they wanted to. They could place 3. And then I would no longer be in the lead. And this is important because being in the lead is going to allow you to take that story to press, or at least being tied for the lead will allow you to do so. So you're going to go around the table, and most of the time at the beginning of the game, players are going to be placing workers onto stories to fight over majority on them, or ties for majority as the case may be. However, your options are not limited there. You can, of course, add more workers to somewhere where you already have workers, bringing your total above whoever else is there. Or you can remove workers. Say you decide that this is a lost cause, you'd rather have your workers back to place them somewhere else on a future turn. Or you can even move workers from one location to another. However, when doing so, you may only move one at a time. So I could take one worker off of this stack where I had two, and perhaps move it over to this Eaglehead story because I think that it's a better opportunity. Regardless, whenever a story becomes covered, whenever you place workers on a story, each newly covered story will bump up the hype or basically the interest in that type of story. Because they're being covered, people are going to become more interested and the value of them gets bumped up. So you'll see that we have one story covered in the guns and one story covered in the Eagleheads, so that this has moved up one space on each of these, increasing the value of the stories. Note that having two different players covering the same story doesn't help us at all. But if two players were covering two different stories, or three players were covering two different stories, this would get bumped up yet another spot. It's one spot for each story of that type being covered. So essentially you're going to be going around the table placing, removing, or moving workers on your turn, trying to gain or have equal with the other players for the majority on a story, adjusting the ranks of these different story types as you go. Once you've got yourself in a favorable position, you're going to go ahead and go to press. So real quick, I'm going to set up a scenario where I'm ready to go to press, and then I'll show you how that works. So let's say that we've gone through several rounds of placing and moving and removing and whatever it might be on players' turns, and this is where we've ended, and it's actually Blue's turn at this point. Blue has placed all of their workers. They're happy with the scenario that they have, so they're ready to go to press. So instead of placing or moving or removing workers, they're going to do going to press action. And how this works is they're going to go to press, and they're going to take any stories where they are currently in the lead with workers or tied for the lead in workers. So we'll go ahead and look at all of the stories they're on. They're either in the lead or tied for the lead on workers. So first one we can take is this one right here. They're going to get their workers back. We'll just say that this is Blue's board for now, not Gray's. So they're going to get their workers back. Gray would also get his workers back. And Gray, for getting kicked off of the story, is going to score some points. Currently, the scoop points for the gun stories is 3. So Gray is going to get 3 points simply for being there, but for getting scooped because Blue took the story before he did. And so Blue's going to take this story and put it over by his board for now. We'll come back to that in a minute. The same is true of this secondary story here. So Blue is going to take this one as well, also kicking off Gray. Gray, again, since he was on another story where he got scooped, is going to get 1, 2, 3 more points because that's the value of a scoop. Once we're done with this, we're going to leave it here for now, but we'll adjust it very shortly. But the other column where Blue is currently winning one is in the baseball / tennis ball scenario over here. This time he has scooped Yellow. The value of a scoop for Yellow is going to be 2 points, so Yellow will score 2, and Blue will of course get his worker back as well. Now that we're done with this, we're going to go ahead and he's going to have to build a newspaper, and you'll see he has a little bit of a problem. He has too many stories. So he's going to place these stories out here, and he must always place top stories, which are the highest valued stories that he has, if he has any of the highest valued stories, which he does. He has 2 crime stories, must be placed at the top of his newspaper. So he must place both of these stories at the top of his newspaper. That is going to be worth some points, and we'll come back to that in just a moment. If he had had a different combination, let's say he had this one, it actually doesn't help him at all. But if he hadn't had the second one, he'd be able to place this story at the top of his newspaper, and he would have covered most of the area of his newspaper. Unfortunately, he waited a little bit too long to claim stories, and he's going to have a bad time. So, once he's placed these, he's going to score points for them. And he's going to score 5 points for each of these stories that he has on his thing, because that's the value of crime stories, 10 points. However, he's going to lose points for each of the unplaced stories he has. So this is a 4-value baseball, or whatever you want to call it, story. He's going to lose 4 points, bringing him down to 6, and then he's going to lose 4 more points because he didn't cover these spaces on his board. He's now down to only 2 points for this round. Let's say instead he hadn't earned this second crime story, and he had earned this baseball story instead. This is called having an exclusive story, because he can take any one story that's not a lead story, not one of the highest scoring stories, that's touching the top of his page, and count double points for it. So in this case, he gets 5 for the crime. He's going to get 8 for doubled for the baseball story, which is going to bring him to 13 minus 2 is 11 points. And he would score those 11 points appropriately for this. So he waited too long to take stories. He had an extra, and that really screwed him over because not only did he not place a story, but this story could have been an exclusive for him, and he didn't get the doubled points for it. Once you're done with all of this, you're going to remove all of the stories. Any ones that you did score, you're going to keep beside your board. Any ones that you weren't able to place will go back to the top of their piles. And then you will adjust these down appropriately. So we can see that this one should be here now. This one should be all the way down. And then we're going to draw a new headline card. This new headline card is going to show us the bonuses and the new stories to add, as well as where this player's advertisement is going to go. He gets a penny for publishing once to show that he's published one newspaper. And when you publish your third or fourth newspaper with fewer players, you're going to go ahead and end the game. But for now, we're going to move up sinking ships one space. We're going to add stories to the bridges. We're going to add one sinking ship story. And we're going to add a D-level gun story here. And this is the new layout of the board that the next player can start with. Finally, this player must now place an advertisement on their board. And these advertisements are going to be, first, areas that cover things up on your board, but second, they're going to make it harder to place stories in future rounds. So you'll see you now have a space that you have to work around. As I said, you're basically going to go on in this scenario until you've had one player publish 4 papers. Once they've published, well, 3 or 4, depending on the number of players, 3 or 4 papers, you're going to go into the end game. That player will no longer get any more turns. All of these will flip over, meaning that they no longer adjust for having new workers placed out on new stories. The value of them will never go up, and each player gets essentially 1 or 2 more turns. The one turn could be that they could place or move one worker, just one. They don't have the option of all of, or as many workers as they want anymore, or they can go to press immediately and they won't get their second turn. The second turn that they get is after they've taken their one move or add of worker, they get to go to press, and so they get one final publication of a newspaper for points. At the end of the game, once everybody's done with that, you're going to look at each player and how many stars they have for each type of paper. So you look at, see, how many stars does each player have for sinking ships. Whoever has the most stars gets the bonus points from sinking ships, so 5 extra points. Whoever has the most stars from guns, likewise, would get the bonus points, 7 for guns, and they would add those to their score. And whoever has the most points through publishing newspapers by best managing their worker resources and their timing in terms of publishing, as well as getting stories related to the bonuses, even the high quality stories with more stars, will be the winner. And there you have it. That is Penny Press. The game itself it's okay. I've seen some hype about it. My favorite parts about it, honestly, the theme is good. I think it's an interesting theme of publishing newspapers. I hadn't seen that done before. The artwork is phenomenally done, and the components are excellent. Everything in production is phenomenal. In terms of gameplay, I would simply call it okay. In my opinion, it's a pretty generic not really worker placement. I guess it's an area control game, right? You're placing workers, yes, but really you're placing them to control stories. The aspects of increasing or decreasing the value of a story based on which ones are covered are somewhat interesting to me. I like that the more people that are interested in getting a story or a type of story, the more that the story will be valued. It's a little bit counterintuitive to me that the more of a certain type of story there are, the more value it's worth. But I understand how it works from a gaming, mechanism perspective, and I think that's okay as well. In terms of choices, I don't know if it's that exciting to me. I'm simply placing workers. I'm trying to get control of the best stories that I can get. Yes, I need to pay attention spatially to how they'll fit in my newspaper, and if I can, I'd like to get something that I can scoop and place at the top of my newspaper for double points. But it's just not that super exciting to me. It's okay. It's fine. The game is rated for 2 to 5 players, and the first time I played it with 2 players, and do not play it with 2 players. It is not a 2-player game. I don't think you should have 2 players on there. The difference for 2 players is that the first player takes 1 action, the second player then takes 2 actions, and for the remainder of the game, you get 2 actions in a row every time it's your turn. Now you might note that this will allow you to place and then immediately go to press, which means that the other player has no chance of responding to your placement that overtakes them or makes you even with them. Yes, they'll get some scoop points, but you get the story. So I just find that it takes all of the excitement out of the game. There's no more kind of back and forth over who controls the story. It's just take the story, publish it. Don't play that way. Trust me, just don't. It's not worth it. Overall, there's some interesting aspects, fighting for control, making sure you have the best star stories that you can get the bonus points at the end of the game, and the spatial aspect, but it's still kind of a meh game for me. If it sounds good to you, definitely check it out. The art alone and the components are worth checking out. The gameplay, if you're into a medium or lighter area control, might be good for you. So if that sounds good, check it out. Penny Press from Asmati Games.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.